The year is 2025. New Bangkok throbs. It's a city that never sleeps. Holographic advertisements blaze across the skyline. Their neon hues reflect in the murky Chao Phraya River. Above, artificial moons cast a sterile glow. It's a city of illusions, a city of dreams and nightmares. The streets are alive with a cacophony of sound. Hovercars zoom through the air, leaving trails of light in their wake. Street vendors hawk their wares, their voices lost in the din. The humid air is thick with the scent of spices, exhaust fumes, and something else. Something indefinable. It's the scent of desperation. Amidst this urban jungle lies Sukhumvit. It is the city's notorious red light district. Here, beneath the neon glow, life takes on a different hue. It's a world of shadows and whispers, a place where everything is for sale, and everyone has a price. Her real name was Lena, but here, in this neon-drenched labyrinth, she was known as Rose. Not for the flower's delicate beauty, but for its thorns, the ones she had carefully cultivated to survive. She was a creature of the night, her days a blur of exhaustion and fleeting moments of peace. Lena moved through the crowds with a practiced ease. Her steps were measured, her gaze guarded. She was a phantom, blending seamlessly into the urban tapestry. Her scarlet dress, a splash of color against the grimy backdrop, was her only concession to the role she played. Each night, she donned a mask. It was a mask of indifference, a shield to protect her from the judging eyes and the casual cruelty. Behind it, Lena's spirit remained unbroken. A flicker of hope still burned within her, a hope that she clung to with fierce tenacity. The air was thick with the smell of rain and cheap cologne. The city seemed to be alive, breathing in sync with the rhythm of the night. Every corner, every shadow held a secret, a story waiting to be told. Music pulsed from a nearby bar, a relentless beat that echoed Lena's own weariness. The neon lights flickered, casting a kaleidoscope of colors on the wet pavement, making the night feel almost surreal. She leaned against a lamppost, its flickering neon casting an eerie glow on her face. Then, she saw him, a figure that seemed to be both part of the crowd and yet distinctly apart from it. He was different from the usual clientele. His presence was almost magnetic, drawing her attention despite the chaos around them. There was a quiet intensity about him. His eyes, deep and searching, seemed to hold 1,000 untold stories. He held himself with a kind of awkward grace, his eyes scanning the crowd with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. It was as if he was looking for something, or someone, in particular. He was out of place here, yet strangely drawn to the chaos. The bustling energy of the city seemed to both overwhelm and invigorate him. He was Daniel, a struggling journalist. His notepad was his constant companion, a silent witness to his quest for the next big story. He had come to Sukhumvit in search of a story that he hoped would change his fortunes and perhaps his life. A story that lay hidden beneath the surface of neon and sin. The city was a labyrinth of secrets, each corner a potential lead. But as he watched the endless stream of faces, he found himself drawn to one in particular, a face that seemed to hold a story of its own. A woman in red, her back leaning against a lamppost, her eyes reflecting the city lights. Their eyes met. In that brief moment, the world around them seemed to fade away. For a fleeting moment, Lena saw something in his gaze that gave her pause. It was a look that spoke of understanding, of shared weariness. It wasn't the usual hunger or the cold appraisal she was used to. It was something different, something kinder, a connection that neither of them could quite explain but both felt deeply. He surprised her. He didn't proposition her like the others. Instead, he offered to buy her coffee. Real coffee, not the synthetic stuff they served in the clubs. Lena hesitated. She had learned to be wary of kindness. It was often a prelude to something more sinister, but there was something about Daniel's eyes that made her want to take a chance. They talked. It started with small talk, the weather, the city, but soon, their conversations delved deeper. Lena found herself opening up to him, revealing glimpses of the woman behind the mask. She told him about her childhood dreams, her aspirations, the life she had envisioned for herself. Daniel listened. He didn't judge. He didn't offer platitudes or empty promises. He just listened. And in that listening, he offered her something she hadn't realized how much she craved: acceptance. For the first time in a long time, Lena felt seen. Not as Rose, the woman she pretended to be, but as Lena, the woman she had forgotten she could be. Section 5. Dreams of a Dancer. The cafe was nearly empty, save for a few scattered patrons lost in their own worlds. Soft jazz played in the background, the notes weaving a tapestry of melancholy and hope. It was a stark contrast to the pulsating rhythms of Sukhumvit, where the night never seemed to end. Lena stirred her coffee, her reflection shimmering in the dark liquid, lost in thoughts of a past life. "I used to dance," she confessed, her voice barely a whisper, as if afraid the words might shatter the fragile peace. Daniel looked up from his notepad, his pen hovering above the paper, sensing the weight of her words. He could see the flicker of something in her eyes, a glimmer of a dream long buried, a spark that had long been dimmed but not extinguished, waiting for the right moment to reignite. He encouraged her to tell him more, his eyes urging her to unburden her soul. The words tumbled out of her, each one a key unlocking a memory. Memories of a time when her life had been filled with music and movement, when every day was a new adventure. A time when her body had been an instrument of joy, not a commodity to be bought and sold, a vessel of pure expression. She spoke of pirouettes and grand jets, of the discipline and the freedom they brought, of the thrill of performance, the rush of adrenaline as the audience held its breath, and the ache of disappointment, the sting of rejection that came with the territory. "There was an audition," Lena said, her voice cracking slightly, the memory still raw. A chance to dance with the National Ballet, a dream she had chased for years. But then, her voice trailed off, the memory too painful to revisit, the wound still fresh. Daniel reached across the table and gently squeezed her hand. "It's okay," he whispered, offering silent support. "You don't have to tell me," he said softly, his presence a balm to her aching heart. Section 6. The Audition. A flyer, tucked away in a dusty corner of a dance studio. It was old, almost forgotten, but it held a promise of something new, an underground audition, a chance to reclaim a forgotten dream, a dream that had once been the center of her world. Lena hesitated. The thought of baring her soul, her vulnerability terrified her. She had been away from the dance floor for so long, but Daniel's words echoed in her mind. "You never know unless you try." His encouragement had always been her anchor. The warehouse was dimly lit, the air thick with anticipation. It was a place where dreams could be reborn or shattered. Dancers stretched and warmed up, their bodies moving with a grace that both intimidated and inspired Lena. She felt out of place, yet drawn to the energy around her. She felt a familiar surge of adrenaline, a mixture of fear and exhilaration. This was her chance. Her heart pounded in her chest. The music started. It was a haunting melody, both beautiful and melancholic. It spoke to her soul, calling her to move. Lena closed her eyes, letting the music wash over her. She felt every note, every beat, as if it were a part of her. She began to move, her body remembering the steps that had once come so naturally. Each movement was a rediscovery of herself. Each movement was an expression of her pain, her longing, her hope. She poured her heart into every step, every turn. The judges watched impassively, their faces unreadable. Lena didn't care. Their approval was no longer her goal. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't dancing for their approval. She was dancing to reclaim a part of herself. She was dancing for herself. In that moment, she found freedom. Section 7. Finding herself. The music stopped. Silence descended, heavy and absolute. Lena stood panting, her chest heaving, her body slick with sweat. The judges' faces remained impassive. She hadn't won, she knew that. But something had shifted within her. Something had broken free. She had faced her fears. She had poured her heart and soul into her dance. And in that moment of raw vulnerability, she had found something more valuable than victory. She had found herself. The judge's decision no longer mattered. She had rediscovered a part of herself that she thought was lost forever. Lena walked out of the warehouse, her head held high. The neon lights of Sukhumvit seemed less harsh now, the city's cacophony somehow muted. She had a renewed sense of purpose, a belief in herself that transcended the grime and the despair. Section 8. A Waiting Heart. He was there, just as he promised, sitting at their usual table in the quiet corner of the cafe, a cup of coffee steaming beside him. Daniel saw the look on her face and knew. He didn't need to ask if she had won. He smiled. It was a smile of quiet understanding, of shared hope. He had seen something in her that night, something that transcended the neon facade of Sukhumvit. He had seen her strength, her resilience, her unwavering spirit. Lena sat down opposite him, her heart overflowing with a mix of emotions. She wanted to tell him everything. About the audition, the judges, the feeling of liberation that washed over her as she danced. But words failed her. Section 9, Hope Blooms. He simply smiled and pushed the cup of coffee towards her. "How was it?" he asked, his voice soft. And in that moment, surrounded by the familiar aroma of coffee and the comforting presence of this kind stranger, Lena knew she was going to be okay. The audition might not have changed her circumstances, but it had changed her. It had reminded her that even in the darkest corners of the city, hope could bloom. And sometimes, all it took was a cup of coffee and a listening heart to make all the difference. The neon lights of New Bangkok still flickered outside. But inside the cafe, a different kind of light shone. It was the light of hope, the light of a new beginning.